won't be on the telly.
It sets me fun.
Don't forget your name badge.
I won't talk about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome those of you who are attending online. We'll get straight into Cabinet today. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Councillor Rachel Garrick.
Yeah. Cabinet, Councillor Garrett's son had a mild accident earlier, so has had to go to A&E. It looks why it's fine. So item 4, I will be presenting on her behalf. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Let's get into the substantive items. Item 3, developing the future of My Day, My Life bases. I could bring you in here, Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Before I present the report that's on the agenda, I just want to announce that I'm proposing that today we only make a decision on the base in Monmouth. That's recommendation 1, and that we defer a decision on recommendations 2, 3 and 4 relating to the Abergavenny base until our next Cabinet meeting. In saying this, I know this will be disappointing to the users of My Day, My Life in the north of our county. Myself and the rest of the Cabinet are clear that there needs to be a base in Abergavenny to meet the specific needs of the relatively small group of adults with a diagnosed learning disability who are currently supported through My Day, My Life, a service that I can assure everybody will continue to be funded and organised by Monmouthshire County Council and its dedicated staff team. But rather than proceed with the decision on a permanent base at this point, I would like us to take more time to further consider the options, particularly how our choice of base for My Day, My Life could support other community organisations who are seeking to provide support and sociability for a wider group of individuals with physical disabilities, neurological challenges, mental health needs and learning difficulties. And I'd like another opportunity to bring together the different community groups and other stakeholders to further explore their needs and aspirations and how they can be best supported. So, but turning back to the report in front of you, I would like to address the report and take you through what we've done and what we were recommending. And I'd like to remind Cabinet colleagues that in July we agreed in full the recommendations of the independent review into My Day, My Life, and these recommendations are being implemented. One of those recommendations was to establish a base for the service in Monmouth and Abergavenny, and that's the topic of today's paper. Earlier this summer, we shortlisted premises using the criteria that service users had said during the review that were important to them. And we shortlisted 3 premises in Abergavenny and 3 in Monmouth. And then following that, we consulted again with service users at a workshop in Monmouth and a series of individual in-person and telephone meetings to further develop those criteria and to seek their views on the shortlisted buildings. And a report of those consultations and the responses from service users are set out in Appendix 3 of the report. We also commissioned an independent surveyor to produce an assessment and costed options appraisal for each of the shortlisted buildings around the issues of ensuring suitable access and accessible toilets that are needed for the service. And the report of that independent surveyor is in Appendix 5. And then, taking all of that together, we then developed the final criteria against which we could make an objective assessment of the merits of each location, and so enable us to make a clear choice. And I do want to spell out what those criteria are, although they're listed in the report. The first criteria is how well does the potential base match the future requirements of My Day, My Life service. And that criterion itself has been broken down into several essential and desirable factors that are listed in the report. The second criteria was the cost of any necessary works to the building to bring it up to a state that could be used as a base, and as well as that, the ongoing additional revenue costs that will be incurred to the council for using that premises. The third criteria was about the speed of implementation, of how quickly we could move into that building, but also, and perhaps more importantly, its future sustainability, how the base might be able to respond flexibly to any future service developments. And then finally, the fourth criteria was the impact on other community spaces and services in the area. Because we want to make sure this is a positive development, not just for the My Day, My Life users, but for others who need facilities and community spaces. So in applying those criteria, in Monmouth, only the Over-Mono Family Learning Centre was able to fulfil, out of the 3 shortlisted premises, only that Over-Mono Family Learning Centre was able to fulfil all of the essential requirements for the service. And so, although it actually is the most expensive option for us, I'm happy to recommend it as the future base in Monmouth. And I hope we can open it very quickly so that service users in the east of their county have a base from which they can access other services in the community. In Abergavenny, though, although it has many positive features, we felt that the Abergavenny Community Centre didn't meet all of our essential requirements, and so we dropped it from further consideration. Of the other 2 premises, we feel that the Melville Centre does offer a better base for the small cohort of My Day, My Life users and would be more cost effective in the long term. And our initial thoughts are that it also has the most positive impact on other community spaces and services in the area. But we want to test this some further. We want to pause the Abergavenny decision and engage in further consultation with the community groups and stakeholders who want to develop their own services for vulnerable adults in the area. So, and even though we're not deciding on them today, I do want to take this opportunity to clarify what is meant by the recommendations 3 and 4 in the paper. In recommendation 3, by declaring Tudor Street surplus to the needs of the Social Care and Health Directorate, it makes the building available for community groups to potentially take it over, as we've done over many years with other council buildings. And recommendation 4, alongside that, would have given a window of opportunity for those groups to come forward with a credible business plan and indications of the finance they can raise. And we have been working with one such group to help them do this, and we'll continue to support that group. So, contrary to what has been said, it was not a decision to permanently close and dispose of Tudor Street. It was a mechanism in order to make it available for other groups to use once it's no longer needed for the Social Services Directorate. So, Cabinet, coming back to the paper, I seek your approval for recommendation 1, that we establish the Monmouth base for My Day, My Life in the Over-Mono Family Learning Centre, taking into account the resource implications of that being a capital investment of an estimated £127,650. And Cabinet, I also seek your approval for a short delay before we make a final decision on recommendations 2, 3 and 4 relating to a base in Abergavenny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chandler, and thank you very much for the serious consideration and engagement that has gone on with the officers to ensure that we are listening carefully and working with community groups who want to establish a much wider base, as you described. And I think it is both the sensible decision and the correct decision to ensure that we get this right. We must always consider our residents and ensure that we hear their voices in a sensible way and in a way that is over a series of engaged and purposeful. And I know that you and officers have been involved since July in meeting with groups on this matter. And it's useful to know that starting to come out of that is a sense of where they would like to go. Before I open it up, Cabinet, can I just confirm you understand that when we come to recommendations, we will be looking at one on the table, and also we will be affirming the recommendation from Councillor Chandler that we leave the recommendation 2, 3 and 4 for a short period of time so we can have clarity with our groups that we are working with at the moment. Cabinet, is there anything you'd like to say? In which case, Councillor John, you were the only person to put in questions, and
Okay.
could you ask them in one go?
Okay, no problem.
Thanks very much.
Well, as the recommendations have changed slightly in terms of what you're considering, I might need to reword a couple of my questions slightly. But firstly, can I welcome the decision to pause on recommendations 2, 3 and 4? I don't think it's ever a sign of weakness to stop and pause and reflect and reconsider, particularly in the face of the level of opposition that we've seen in the community. So I welcome that. We have been consistent in our position that we think Tudor Street is the most appropriate location in the Abergavenny area. The first question I proposed was about the level of engagement with service users and their families, and are you satisfied with the level of engagement that has
Could
taken
you
place?
ask more in one go?
Okay, my second question was about the costs and the justification for the additional recommendations, which I appreciate you're not making a decision on them today, but in the debate when Labour and Green Independent members voted to defeat the motion to reopen Tudor Street, you indicated in your contribution that the costs associated with Tudor Street may be prohibitive. You mentioned hundreds of thousands of pounds in capital costs and tens of thousands in terms of running costs, which obviously referred to in the report. But if cost is such a major factor in the exclusion of Tudor Street, then why have you opted for the most expensive of the 3 options in Monmouth? My third question is that the report infers that Tudor Street is closing not because it doesn't meet the criteria, on the contrary, it does, but because of the risks of having too many community facilities in Abergavenny. So have Cabinet members had discussions with any of the trustees of the Abergavenny Community Centre or directors of the Melville Centre? And can you give us any insight as to the nature of those discussions? And my fourth question, obviously there was a sense of hope when you were appointed that this was someone who had been very vocal in calling for the Tudor Street Day Centre to reopen, and now we see that Cabinet has published this report. I appreciate you're not making a decision on it today, that you've agreed to pause, albeit at the 11th hour, but you put forward a proposal that is the exact opposite of what you called for just a few weeks before taking on this role. So do you understand that sense of disappointment and how let down residents feel that you're now, according to your paper, proposing to do exactly what Tudor Thomas proposed to do in the beginning and permanently close Tudor Street? So those are my questions, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor John. I will try and answer them in turn. So your first question about, am I satisfied with the level of engagement with service users and their families? Yes. As it's set out in Appendix 3, we've been actually very active in getting the views of service users and their families over the summer. And of course, before that, they were extensively consulted by Practice Solutions when they were conducting the independent review. So no, I'm very satisfied with that. The figures are in Appendix 3. I think it was 60% of service users in Monmouth it took part in the second round of consultations over the summer, and 81% of the service users in Abergavenny also took up the offer of being able to feed in their views and being consulted. So yes, I'm quite satisfied that we've done that. Secondly, you talk about the cost. Why did we choose the most expensive of the options in Monmouth? And the cost with Tudor Street, as I said in Cabinet, it was not the capital costs for Tudor Street that was a prohibitive factor, because all of the venues in Abergavenny would have required a significant capital investment to make them fit for purpose. It was more the ongoing revenue costs that were the factor that I was referring to in council in terms of that responsibility of not just running a service, but also operating a large and old building and all the associated costs that would go with that, not just maintenance, but just the facilities management of that. So that's what I was referring to in council. But in terms of the decision about Monmouth, I mean, the paper sets out clearly why we made the recommendation in Monmouth, and as I introduced it earlier, and really, yes, it is the most expensive in terms of the capital investment required in Monmouth, but we still feel it's the best premises for the base for My Day My Life there, and it just demonstrates that although cost is one of the factors we're considering, it's not the overriding factor, and it's one that we take, but we have to be responsible. I'm sure you would, agree with us. You have to be responsible in looking at costs and the impact on the council and looking for value for money. And I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that, Councillor John. You've asked also about whether we'd had discussions with the Abergavenny Community Centre and the Melville Centre, and yes, myself and officers have met between us, many times with staff and trustees at those places, and we will continue to do so on a range of issues, both logistical and contractual, and that will continue to happen. And then your final question, where you're sort of challenging me on my position in terms of have I done exactly the opposite of what I was calling for before? No, I don't think I have, and I will defend that. In terms of, trying to make that, I mean, I could ask you, Councillor John, what your position was on the future of Tudor Street when you were the leader of this administration, but I'm not going to ask that question because I don't want to turn this important and emotive issue into a political football. The adults in our community with learning disabilities deserve better than this. I will say that, Councillor John, you need to read the paper and the recommendations more closely. And as I explained, you will see that I did not propose to permanently close and dispose of Tudor Street. That's not what the paper says. The paper says is putting in the mechanisms to make it potentially available to community groups to take over if they have the ability to do so. And as I said, we're working with community groups to see and help them to get in a position where they might be able to do that. Although that journey will take some time to fruition if it ever does. So I think that answers your question, so hopefully it does.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor John and Councillor Chandler. If we have no more questions from Cabinet, I'd like to proceed to the recommendations. We're being asked two things tonight, Cabinet. One, that we agree with the recommendation to that the Overmont Family Learning Centre is the future My Day My Life base in Monmouth. And I would add with that, we want this to be done as soon as possible. We know there is no need to delay, and we do have an opportunity here to ensure that we've got a base in that part of the county that's serving the needs of adults who are already using My Day My Life there. The second recommendation is that we do not agree recommendation 1, 2 and 3.
So 2, 3 and 4.
2, 3 and 4. My problem in number sequencing, an issue. We do not agree all except 2, 3 and 4 at this point.
I'll just clarify the wording that we defer consideration of recommendations 2, 3 and 4.
Thank you.
Because we're not rejecting them or agreeing them, we're just deferring consideration. Yes, would that be a better wording?
I think it would be actually. And we are deferring consideration because we are again wanting this to be coming to a conclusion in a shortest period of time as possible, so we can come back to Cabinet to consider what has occurred and what would be a way forward.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Would that sum up nicely?
I think so.
So in that case, are we agreed to those two set of recommendations, Cabinet?
Yes.
Could I see a show of hands? Thank you very much. We now move to item 4, and bear with me. I look nothing like Councillor, and I don't have absolute forensic understanding of assets and finances. So bear with me.
Close the meeting.
Huh?
Do we need to go into confidential mode?
No, we don't.
Don't we? Oh, okay.
No, I have checked.
Yeah.
Item 4 is the disposal of land at Nantagovey Lane, Mardy, Abergavenny. Nantagovey, pardon me. There is part of this item which is confidential. It's only part of the item, so we will continue live streaming, and I will not be referring to it because it's not material to the decision that we're about to make. This report presented to Cabinet is seeking approval to dispose of a parcel of land adjacent to Nantagovey Lane Business Park and Mardy Park Resource Centre in Abergavenny. You'll see a map is included in your pack. The land is currently vacant grazing land. The land was submitted as a potential development site in the replacement local development plan and presents an opportunity to support economic development. The proposal is to extend the business park to provide increased availability of small, new starter light industrial and office accommodation. There is a high demand for this type of accommodation in this area, evidenced by regular inquiries from interested parties at the adjacent estate. Since promotion of the candidate site in the RLDP, MCC's Estates Department have received an offer to purchase the land by the owner of Nantagovey Lane Business Park. Given the access to this parcel is constrained and preferably achieved via the existing estate, it's considered that the offer received is from a special purchaser, the definition of which is captured within the accompanying Cabinet report and exempt information. While the financial details of this transaction are considered commercially sensitive and therefore exempt, the proposed disposal will ensure best consideration is achieved for the land and enable the development of much space, which aligns with the ambition of the community and corporate plan. The proposed disposal would be conditional upon planning approval and inclusive of the appropriate legal mechanisms to protect any future uplift in value or alternative use. The recommendations of the report seek to approve to enter contract for disposal to the special purchaser at market value and to delegate the authority to the acting head of landlord services and chief officer for resources to finalise the terms of disposal. I know from talking to one of my ward members that this really is a good news story for small businesses and startup businesses, not just in Mardy and Abergavenny, but as far up as Llanelli Hill and the heads of the valleys. It's much needed and is part of our, as you know, our desire to stimulate and support economic growth. So I would commend this report to you and would suggest if you have any comments or observations. I think it is fairly straightforward. Any observations online? I could go to the recommendations. There are two. That land forming part of land registry, title number CYM 581092, outlined and read on the attached plan, which I made sure you had a look at, be disposed of subject to contract and on a conditional basis, subject to planning approval for B1 use class to the owner of Nantagovey Lane Business Park as a special purchaser for market value. Are we agreed, Council?
Yeah.
Cabinet, rather. And secondly, as I outlined, as I presented this report to you, that we delegate responsibility to the acting head of landlord services and the chief officer for resources to finalise the terms of the disposal. Are we agreed, Cabinet?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have no other items on the agenda, so I will now close Cabinet. Thank you for your attendance and thank you everybody watching online and in the room.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.